Mar-a-Lago is one of the most famous, maybe one of the most infamous addresses in the United States. Nobody can argue that this property is extremely valuable. Nobody can argue that this property is extremely controversial. And if you're Trump, you're going to consider this property to be a pretty big deal. He has referred to it as the Mona Lisa, the crown jewel, and he has called it a national treasure. Here's my question for today's episode though. Just how much is this infamous property really worth? Some articles will tell you Mar-a-Lago is worth $1 billion. Other articles will tell you that Mar-a-Lago is worth as low as $18 million. And most articles are politically biased, so it's kind of hard to trust anything you read about Mar-a-Lago on the internet. But here's the deal. I'm not only a real estate nut who just loves this stuff, but I also spent 15 years in corporate America, and in my job, I looked at literally thousands of appraisals for homes scattered all over the country. Today, I'm going to try to ignore all of the political nonsense and just focus on the real estate and try to get to the bottom of how much Mar-a-Lago is actually worth. Before we really start breaking this down, I want to be clear that the only real reason that anybody has been talking about this is because last year, a New York judge ruled that the former president exaggerated the value of a bunch of his real estate. Trump has stated that the value of Mar-a-Lago has been as much as $1 billion, and the judge is claiming that Mar-a-Lago is only worth around $18 million. The case that the judge is trying to make here is that Trump's estimated value of the home was around 23 times the Palm Beach County tax appraiser's valuation of the house. And I want to stop right there for a second and just say that I'm pretty sure it's widely accepted that the tax valuation of your house is generally lower than the actual value of your house. Like this house that I'm living in is probably worth, I don't know, maybe $850,000 if I were to sell it today. But you go to the tax assessor's website, it says this house is worth like $260,000. And just to show you guys the history that she's looking at, here's the Palm Beach County tax assessor's website. We got his address, 1100 South Ocean Boulevard. Here's the deed history. This is interesting, kind of a little side note, but December of 1985 is when Trump first bought this place for $5 million. This is actually a copy of the original deed from way back in 1985. It's pretty cool. The seller was Marjorie Merriweather Post, and then the grantee or the buyer was Donald J. Trump. You'll see that March of 1995, the property sold again for $12 million. And here's that deed where it says that Donald J. Trump deeded the property to Mar-a-Lago Club, Inc. I think this happened right around when he converted this place from just a regular residence into an actual club. He probably needed to sell it to this entity to make that happen. But going back to the county's website, so if you scroll down to the bottom here, it goes over all the property details and stuff, but right down here are the appraisals for each tax year. So you can see that the total market value of Mar-a-Lago, according to the Palm Beach County tax assessor, ranges from $37 million all the way down to $26 million back in 2019. So yeah, this is where the judge got her value whenever she did her study. But the thing is, the county is giving Mar-a-Lago its value for taxation based on the club's annual net operating income as a club and not on its resale value as a home or on its reconstruction costs. And that's what's tricky about Mar-a-Lago, which we'll break down here in a second, the differences between the club versus residence. But yeah, it's not a residence anymore. Mar-a-Lago's a club. We're not going to get into the entire history of Mar-a-Lago today. We already did that on the channel a couple of years ago, but we do need to talk about some of the home specs and details because some of this is relevant to the valuation that we're talking about today. The home was built in 1927 by a serial heiress, Marjorie Merriweather Post. She gave the property its name because Mar-a-Lago stands for sea to lake, which is exactly what you get with this property. It stretches from the Intercoastal Waterway to the Atlantic Ocean. The home was given to the National Park Service when Post died in 1973, but they couldn't afford to maintain it, so it was put up for sale in 1985, and this is when Trump bought it for just $5 million. By 1994, Trump turned the residence into Mar-a-Lago Club as we know it today, which is a members-only club that's basically like a high-end hotel. If you want to be a member, by the way, it's going to cost you, it's $200,000 just for your initial membership fee. Then you're going to spend another $14,000 per year in annual fees. The property itself is massive. It has about 37,000 square feet of space, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, 12 fireplaces. It's got a 20,000 square foot ballroom. The architecture and craftsmanship throughout the interiors are insane. It comes with a 132 foot long swimming pool, a 27 hole golf course, 5 tennis courts, a private beach, and honestly, I don't even know what else. A lot of this house has been kind of kept under wraps, and a lot of the things that have happened here in different wings of the house are pretty private, but let's just put it this way, this is not your typical Palm Beach mega mansion. Is special. When you're valuing a house, the appraisal process is honestly pretty straightforward. The appraiser comes out, they look at your home, they take a bunch of notes and a bunch of photos, then they go back to their office to draw up the appraisal report. This report typically is going to compare your home to another 3 to 6 similar homes that have recently sold in your area, and that's how they come up with your home's value. So for example, let's just talk about my house again. I live in a house that's about 2,000 square feet. I've got 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. The lot size is about 7,500 square feet, and I have a swimming pool. If somebody was doing an appraisal on my house to determine how much it's worth, what they would do is they would look at homes that have sold within about a quarter-mile radius of my house that have 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a similar lot size, and that also have a swimming pool. So based on just that logic, I want to go on Zillow and look at the homes that have sold in the area of Mar-a-Lago. I know Mar-a-Lago is not a home, but everything surrounding Mar-a-Lago is residential real estate. So we have to look at what's selling in the immediate area just to give us kind of a baseline. It is all over the place. Like, we've got values from basically 4 million to 53 million, but we need to take a closer look at some of these comps. So just take the closest one, for example. This one here, $11.8 million, right? This is literally right next door to Mar-a-Lago. First of all, look at the size of this little postage stamp lot compared to Mar-a-Lago's. But let's click on it. Let's take a closer look. It's only 5,400 square feet. Mar-a-Lago is 37,000 square feet. It's only 0.36 acres. So if we just do the math on that, $11,760,000. We're looking at $32 million an acre if we're just looking at the land value of this one. Let's say pretty tight to Mar-a-Lago and just poke around it a few more. So we got this one up here for 14 million. And another thing to point out, neither one of these properties are ocean facing or water facing at all for that matter. So there's no water frontage, but this one's 14 million. It's tiny. It was only 4,800 square feet and about the same lot size, 0.38 acres. So yeah, just doing the same math, we're at about 36 million an acre based on the land value, and it's not even on the water. There's this one up here, 21.8 million. This one's a little larger. It's 8,700 square feet. And what's the lot size on this one here? 0.4 acres. Now we're looking at 55 million an acre for this one. Then last, I know someone's going to call me out if I don't click on this one. So 4.2 million for this little guy here, which is kind of weird because it's right next to another one. So it's almost like they parceled off their lot. But let's look at this thing. It says number 3C. So that tells me this is probably a condo. Yeah, it's a remodeled 2-bedroom, 2-bath, move-in ready apartment. So it's 1,900 square feet. It's not on the water. It's an apartment, so it's not even a house. You guys are probably wondering why I'm focused so much on lot value, and I want to look at this from 2 different perspectives. One way you can look at it is what are homes selling for price per square foot in the area, but that's a method that would be used more often if you're looking at a residential home compared to a residential home. So what I'm trying to do is be a little bit more fair here and look at just the land value, because you can't really argue that. Like, if land is going for 36 million to 55 million per acre in this region, and that's not even waterfront land, that gives us kind of a baseline. I kind of want to flip over to for sale now, because the thing is about sold, since not a lot sells in this area, you're not going to get a lot of recent comparables, meaning you don't have many comparables at all. So if we flip to for sale and you just look at what's going on around here, so we've got over here on the other side of the freeway, 40 million for this one, which is waterfront. It's 6,400 square feet, and this one is 0.49 acres, and it's not even built yet. This is just land. Up here, north of Mar-a-Lago, we've got, well, you guys can see 45 million, 13 million, 13 million, 15 million. So some pretty big price points. Nowhere near $1 billion, no doubt, but let's just look at the highest price point here, $45 million. The offering is for a house that's not even built yet. Then again, to be fair, we can look at the cheapest one in the area too. This one's 13 million. It's basically right across the street from Mar-a-Lago. So 13 million for this one, 5,400 square foot house, 0.34 acre lot. While we're on this map view, so we're getting a rough idea of what land value is worth in the area, I just want to zoom out and scroll over here a little bit. So we have Mar-a-Lago at the top of the screen. Look down here, see all this construction? This is that Ken Griffin property that we've talked about here on the channel before. If you look, what's happening here is basically these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lots Ken Griffin has bought over the course of the past like 10 years. He's combined all of them, and now he's building this monster property that's right on the water. The estimates from what I remember is that Ken Griffin spent something like $300 million in total just amassing all of this land, and only now is he building his palace here. So if I zoom out again, I'm not trying to prove any point here, I'm just trying to point something out. This is Ken Griffin's estate, where he spent hundreds of millions of dollars just on land before even starting to build his property. This is Mar-a-Lago. If you look at it from this view, these are probably the most comparable properties to each other. There's a few ways to look at it, but there you have it. I think on lot value, we're looking at somewhere around $45 million. I think you guys could agree based on the couple of comparables we looked at. So if we take $45 million times 17 acres, which is how many acres Mar-a-Lago is sitting on, that's a value of $765 million just when you're looking at the land alone. Plus, I think it's worth noting that there are real estate experts both in Palm Beach and outside of Palm Beach who have said that Mar-a-Lago is worth anywhere from $200 to $725 million. Forbes valued the property last year and said it was worth $350 million. The numbers are all over the place, and I'm not trying to be political or take any side here, but from what I'm seeing, Mar-a-Lago is definitely worth a lot more than 18 million bucks. Now, for all of you guys out there who are like, hey, Scott, you cannot be comparing Mar-a-Lago to a bunch of residential houses all around Palm Beach. Mar-a-Lago is not a residential house. Fair point. You're right. Mar-a-Lago is actually a business, so let's take a look at it and try to value it as a business. According to financial disclosure forms, Mar-a-Lago brought in anywhere between $21 million and $30 million per year from the years 2015 to 2019. Businesses are typically valued at a multiple of their annual revenue. This chart here gives us an idea of how much a business can be valued at based on what the industry of the business is. Now, I'd consider Mar-a-Lago a hospitality business, but that's not on this list, so we can just look at business services as an example. A business service company making in the $10 million per year range is valued at around 7 times revenue typically. Mar-a-Lago is making about $25 million per year on average, so again, it's not a perfect comparison, but just for the sake of staying conservative, let's assume a 7 times multiple on that revenue. So if we take the $25 million in annual revenue and we multiply that by 7, that gives you a valuation of this business of $175 million. Here, though, is where things get interesting. If Trump wanted to sell Mar-a-Lago, the business, like he wanted to sell this big membership club that makes $25 million per year to somebody for $175 million, he would just be selling the business that's generating all of this cash. This means, at least based on the way I understand how businesses are valued, that Mar-a-Lago, the address, or Mar-a-Lago, the property itself, is still a separate entity. Like Trump could sell the business for $175 million, but then what happens with the real estate? Does he also sell them that real estate in a separate transaction? Does he keep the real estate and then lease Mar-a-Lago out to that new business owner? This part does get a little messy and complicated for me. I don't don't have experience selling businesses or fully understand how businesses are valued when the business does own real estate, but the real estate no doubt carries some value when selling a business. It's very similar to how FF&E carries value when you're selling a restaurant that's full of cooking appliances and furniture. The point is, valuing Mar-a-Lago is complicated. It is not your typical Shark Tank deal, but just based on the publicly available annual revenue of this business, if we're looking at this as a business and not a residence, Mar-a-Lago's worth at least a couple $100 million. In the end, we need to look at it like this, and this might seem oversimplified, but this is just how it goes. Mar-a-Lago is worth whatever somebody is willing to pay for it. Any of you guys out there who have bought a house before can definitely relate on this one. 9 times out of 10, when you buy a house, it appraises for exactly what you have it under contract for. I'll even use my own house as an example again. This house was on the market for $395,000 when I first went after it. I got it under contract for $370,000, and when the appraisal came in a few weeks later, guess what it appraised for? Exactly $370,000. So yeah, from that standpoint, the only way to really value Mar-a-Lago is by considering what somebody would actually pay for it if it ever went up for sale. The reality is that Mar-a-Lago is probably never going up for sale, at least not anytime soon. It's just way too valuable of an asset for the Trump family. But if it did, I'd be willing to bet that there would be at least one billionaire out there who's willing to pay at least $500 million for this place, just based on the land value alone. Because yeah, it would take a billionaire to buy this place, and there are around 3,000 billionaires in the world. Let's just say there were a dozen of those billionaires who were really interested in the Mar-a-Lago property and who had no issues with the Trump association with the property. If these dozen people got into a bit of a bidding war, I could easily see the value of this thing being driven up to $1 billion or more, just simply because on paper, you kind of could make a case for that. I really couldn't care less what Mar-a-Lago's worth at the end of the day. We can speculate all we want for fun, and I guess we can have a little bit of a laugh at all the people who just get way too wound up over this topic. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you next week.